All right. Hi, Chris. Welcome. Thanks for agreeing to chat with me today.
Thank you for paying me $5 million to
Yeah.
be on your chat.
Yes, money will come via e-transfer after this. After this, why don't we
thanks
start
for
here
thanks
with
for having me.
yeah, no problem. Why don't we start here with a quick introduction? Just let people know who you are and what sort of projects you've been working on lately. That's what we'll
My,
be talking about today.
yeah, my name is Chris DeMakes. I probably am best known for the guitarist and singer for the band Less Than Jake. We're from Gainesville, Florida. Been doing this for a few moons. Started back in 1992, and I do a bunch of other stuff. I'm a solo artist. I'm an author. I have a podcast, a songwriting podcast called Chris DeMakes Podcast, among other things that we'll get into. So yeah, I got my hands in a few projects.
You're keeping busy, and that's the reason I wanted to talk to you today. Is I think over the past year, a lot of people have had different approaches to what they've done with during the changes during COVID pandemic. And I know for like myself as a creative person, as a writer, I struggled hard at the beginning, as momentum on everything I was working on just crashed to a halt. And it took me a few months to get back to a place where I was like, okay, no, like I need to see this as an opportunity. Things have changed, things have slowed down. What can I do to not just lose a year of my life creatively? And so I worked on a few different projects and launched a newsletter, which is what we're doing this interview for. And kind of concurrently, I also noticed you launching a lot of personal projects, including a new podcast. um, and I wanted to talk to you about maintaining and creating like professional and creative momentum during something, during troubling times when a lot of people, like, life kind of crashed to a halt and could be hard to pick up again. You seem to kind of take that as an opportunity to get into new projects. And I guess the first thing I'm kind of curious about is like, what was so Less Than Jake, which is your one of your major projects, is known to be a touring band. You guys play a lot of shows, spend a lot of time on the road. Like, how did you personally, as the lockdowns and the pandemic started, how did you personally kind of adjust to the idea that all of a sudden, like, you know the job that you devote so much of your time to is gonna stop and be put on hold indefinitely? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I never had a chance to get to that mindset of that, and I'm glad I didn't because
Mhm.
that could have really done a number on me, like it has a lot of my friends in the industry. When I say industry, it could be people such as yourself, writers, people
Mhm.
that work for the online magazines, the print magazines, the promoters, the booking agents, the managers, everybody. I've seen people go through hell because the bottom of their life dropped out. When I say that never, I never got in the grips of that. We made our last record, Silver Linings, in November and December of 2019. And that year, the wheels were kind of in motion. I was starting to put this book together that was released last December called Blast from the Past. And it was my first ever book. Um, so I had that in the works, but I had gotten home, and all these years since 1992, I'm 47. I was always content and satisfied with what Less Than Jake did. I was Chris from Less Than Jake. I was fine with that. I never had any solo projects. Went out once a year around the holiday times. I'd play some solo shows, just me and my acoustic guitar, but it was never like I have a solo career or anything like that. So all my eggs were in the Less Than Jake basket all these years. I was completely fine with it. And I have two small children now, a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I got home from recording, and I knew that our plan as a band for 2020 was, and we knew this back in when we were finishing the record in December of 2019, that we were going to take, not really by choice, is we had to take like 4 months off. We didn't want to go out and saturate the markets of playing. We wanted to be able to set up our record properly that was supposed to come out in April. They got pushed back to July. They got pushed back to September, October, and finally came out in December last year because everyone thought at some point we're going to be able to go and tour this damn thing. But so the band never had taken much more than two months off at a time, 3 months. I mean, we're always gone. You can look at our touring history; it's pretty insane. We tour harder than bands half our age, and we've always prided ourselves on that. So I knew that we had a good 4 months off. We had a couple sporadic shows at the top of last year. We had a show in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and then we went down to Costa Rica and played a show. And we had 2 shows in Mexico. And then yesterday, February 28th, that was a year since we played our last show, which was at a casino in Connecticut. But barring those sporadic shows, aside from those sporadic shows that we had, we pretty much had 4 months off. So I kind of had this, it wasn't a midlife crisis, but it was like this epiphany. I just had been thinking a lot at the tail end of 2019 that, I'm on the back 9 of my life. I'm past middle age. I basically, who am I outside of Less Than Jake? And a friend of mine had asked me to write a song for her. Her dad had passed away. She was having a hard time with it. It had been 3 years. She's a dear fan of the band, friend of the band. I did the song, and she asked me, she just was crying over it, loved it, went crazy, asked me what she owed me for it. I said, nothing. It's, you've given me plenty over the years. You bought enough t-shirts and tickets. And she said, no, what's your PayPal? And I gave her my PayPal account number and information. Opened up my email later that day and was just slack-jawed at what she had given me. And I'm like, I can't accept it. She's like, no, take it. And that was in early December 2019. And just kind of this bell went off. It was just like, I should write custom songs and jingles. I'm really good at it. I have these 4 months off. This will just give me something to do while we have this time off. So this was pre-COVID that this was happening. So I started doing that. And then the next thing was, well, people were always asking me advice, always asking me things. So I started doing one-on-one Zoom consultations. Anything from how do you get your band started to, can you listen to our music? Can you produce a song with me? Can you write a song with me? You have any suggestions for our social media presence, et cetera, et cetera. So I started doing that, which led into me hiring a manager for just my solo endeavors. His name's Chris Fafalios. Chris plays in a band called Punchline from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They used to be on Fueled by Ramen. I've known Chris for 20 years. He's an animator. He did this animated video for my custom songs. One thing led to another. He told me, you should do a podcast. I was like, I don't want to do a podcast. Everybody has a podcast. He's like, no, you'd be really good at it. It should have a central theme of songwriting because you're doing these custom songs. It'll all tie in together. I started doing that. Of course, the book was getting worked on last year. So everything just kind of snowballed. So sorry to be long-winded, but back to your original question, I never had time to be in the grips of, oh crap, my whole life bottomed out from me. If anything, I knew I was very fortunate to, not even from a financial standpoint, just from a spiritual and a creative standpoint, to feel like you have a purpose when you wake up in the morning. I was just so thankful that I had all of this, and also kind of not thankful for the lockdown, but thankful that I wasn't going back out on the road, because I wouldn't have been able to devote the proper time to these projects that I never did in my career. I always just did Less Than Jake. So it's been a really crazy series of events that I can't explain. I've just kind of, I've rolled with the punches, and I'm just happy to be doing what I'm doing.
That's excellent. It sounds like it's kind of sort of a confluence of sort of long intended like ideas with kind of happenstance with the pandemic coming when it did. Were these projects, so like it sounds like the other Chris approached you about the podcast project. You're also working on a book. Are these projects that have been in your head for a while? Like, one thing that I've been impressed with your podcast is how focused it is. Like, you have all of these people that you're talking to, and you have some fabulous guests on the podcast, but you still remain like on topic and focused. And I think that that's somewhere that a lot of kind of creative interview style media falls apart, is that they'll get a guest in and then there's no real focus. And so, like, was that something you came up with?
Oh, well, that was actually me. I had told Chris that if I'm going to do this, that I want it to be complete 180 of who I am from Less Than Jake, because I love a good fart and a dick joke. I'll tell them all day long, and I get on stage and I can act like an idiot and under the guise of punk rock and have fun and still be silly and people laugh at it. But for this, I was like, No, I don't want it to be that. There's too many podcasts like that that are out there. Like, what are you doing, man? I'm smoking a joint. What are you doing? Oh, I'm doing, like, you know, I wanted it to have a theme, as you said, focused. I wanted it to be focused. That was very important. I try to keep the swearing and the F bombs to a minimum, if any. I know people are going to be listening in the cars with their children. This is a PG-13 podcast. I didn't want it to be dirty or crass, or I wanted it to be informative and fun. And the best compliments I've gotten are from people that don't know much about songwriting or don't really know it, that they're able to get through an episode and understand. I try to, sometimes I'll stop myself and say, well, an A&R guy is this, or this is this. I'll try to explain because, I don't want people to get lost. And that's one of the reasons I don't get into, and I had a guy, I did an interview for Guitar Magazine. He's like, yeah, I'm kind of wish you would get into like amps and gear and stuff on the show. I'm like, you want people to tune out? Yeah, this is a Fender Stratocaster through a Marshall 212 with this pedal, and which is interesting to me. But at some point, you have to put the brakes on. So yeah, I wanted it to be focused, and I wanted it to be, not silly and stupid and crass and be like, oh, here's the dick joke again. I didn't want that.
It's really interesting to hear that was a conscious decision because, like I said, I've listened to you guys. I've been watching you guys at shows, Less Than Jake, since like the late 90s. And I thought I knew who Chris DeMakes was because I bought into that stage persona, of, the kind of, effusive, like sarcastic punk rocker. And so I started listening to your podcast and watching some stuff on YouTube, and I was like, wow, Chris is coming across like very different than I expected him to. And I kind of really fell into the way that you were able to connect with other people and sort of bring out stories from them. And I think that that's something that just comes naturally to some people. Um, and one of the things I think that creating content online does to people is like you have to kind of make a choice of whether you're putting your whole self out there, whether you're kind of creating, like a level of separation between like who you really are and what you're putting out there as a way to protect yourself. And I thought it was interesting to see you having sort of multiple different sides of your personality coming out in your different side projects.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, back in the day when you'd see a band, they'd say, yeah, and the next act. And they called it an act because it essentially was your act. It was your routine that you practiced and you got up there like a comedian does. And certainly that side of me, the comedic crass punk rock side, which I grew up loving, and I still liked, that's why I got into punk rock. It pissed people off, and I still hold on to that. And but this was a different dynamic, and that's not me. I'm not telling those jokes at the dinner table with my in-laws. That's who I am in this podcast is me. That's who I am. And that's what I wanted to get across. It didn't need to be the other thing. I think if it was the other thing, then what you're talking about, the human side and me being able to pull stuff out of people, I wouldn't be able to retain that, and that's with anything, with any TV show, with any music. It's always the human emotion, what hits you in the heart, and what makes your mind tingle and your heart tingle is that human emotion. And I feel that we really do get that across with the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. What does it feel like during this time when I think a lot of us are sort of craving human interaction, and you're providing a product that gives that, like sitting down and listening to your podcast feels like you're sitting, in a coffee shop or a bar with you and your guest for 45 minutes, an hour. And if, it kind of gives me a bit of that sense of personal interaction that I crave during the pandemic. I work from home, so I don't see anybody. I can go a week without seeing anybody but my family. What does it feel like kind of putting yourself out there as, Chris DeMakes after all this time during a pandemic when people are like really looking to make personal connection?
It's the same thing you just said. I mean, I'm, right now this is my basement studio. This is where I work. I'm down here 7 days a week. I make time for my children, and during the day, my wife, and head to the grocery store and took the garbage out this morning. Do all the shit you got to do, but I go sometimes without that human contact. So this has been a way that has kept me connected, not just with my friends in the business, but with other people and making connections. And not even like, oh, I'm networking, making connections for money down the line or anything, just making those human connections. just
Mhm.
being able to pick up with somebody like, I hadn't talked to Mark from Sugar Ray in years, and man, him and I had a ball on the podcast recently. We laughed our butts off. It was a great conversation, and it gives me that interaction during the week. Like you said, it's like you're at having a coffee down the road or having a beer down the road with your friends. It's definitely been great. And I had no idea all the things that Chris, my manager, had said, which he's also the producer and partner for the podcast. He, had told me a whole laundry list of reasons why I should do this, and every single check mark has come true. You should do it because you're a songwriter. It'll be able to promote your songwriting. It'll be able to promote your this. It'll be able to network. It's good. What if you got known in the podcast? It could make the band more popular, which is happening. I'm having people go, "Oh, that's the dude from Less Than Jake," or people that go, "I love your podcast. I've never heard your band." That freaks me out. Like, you heard my podcast, but you never heard Less Than. I've never heard you, but I can't wait to see you guys play. That's really cool, And Chris had mentioned or all those things that could come true, and I'm really glad I did it for that.
Yeah, and kind of to I guess jump off on that. This is the first. So I run a newsletter, and it usually I just write about something from my perspective that relates to creative work, writing, or books that I'm reading, or whatever. But I'm sort of connecting the dots over the course of this conversation that I've just made a kind of a switch in my head about how I want to kind of present topics and find new voices to bring forward in the newsletter. And part of that is I'm reaching out, and this is the first in a series of interviews that I'm doing with people I don't know. You and I don't know each other. People I do know, and I think that the way that you were able to bring these people in and kind of create kind of a social feeling around a topic of conversation has been very inspirational to me personally. And so that's been kind of valuable for me, because it can be very isolating during this pandemic when you don't see people. And I'm an introvert. I don't need to see people all the time, but it gets to all of us. And I think that being able to kind of connect with somebody who has similar interests, or a story that crosses over with you, and bring that forward for people can connect a lot of people, and kind of create cross connections between topics and people's bands and things. So I
Yeah, for
appreciate that.
sure. And I think the other thing is just, not trying to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Mhm.
I have a tendency to do that. I have a tendency to, well, what if, April or May? It's like, well, what's the date today? It's only March. Why
Mhm.
are you thinking that? I mean, sometimes you have to think ahead. You have to plan, for your retirement or whatever, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, staying in the moment for me is really important, especially with something like this. It's like, what do I have to do today?
Mhm.
And some people might get up, and that's the dread they're feeling of, I'm lost. I don't know what to do today. Pick up the pen, start writing about your feelings, write them down. If you end up writing for 8 hours that day and that's all that you did, you have 8 hours of journaling that you may be able to turn that into a book. You may be able to help somebody with those writings. Stay busy, stay focused. And I've had moments in my life where I haven't been busy and I haven't been focused, where I've been off the road, and I don't do well in those situations. I don't need human contact necessarily. I'm kind of like yourself, but it's nice to have. It's nice to, I'm not a complete hermit that doesn't want to see other human beings. It's not like that at all. Especially what I've done all these years is play to huge crowds and be around people all the time, especially traveling in close quarters with a band on planes and buses and hotels and everything else. So, but just to have that purpose every day of waking up and going, I know what I'm doing today, you
Yeah.
know.
That helped me a lot as well during this whole past year, is having focus and launching new projects, and um, having confidence that whatever you do, as long as you're kind of putting energy into, you know, what for you, your podcast or writing or whatever. For me, writing, knowing that like there's something there for you. And I feel like being lost and listless through a lot of this would have been very challenging for me. I guess like you talk about getting ahead of yourself, but one question I have is like, I'm starting to look at what happens once, the end of the pandemic is sort of, it's not going to come with a bang, but it's coming, life's going to change for us again, I guess. And we've gotten used to life being a certain way over the past year, and you've launched new projects. What how do you maintain momentum with personal projects? When and after Less Than Jake starts picking up touring again and free time sort of changes the way that we see free time or business time.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because the free time will be a different free time. You know, when
Mhm.
we're on the road, I've always been an early riser, but so I'm usually up on tour. This is early. A lot of guys don't get up till 11, 12, 1 in the afternoon on the road. You know, be up for an hour and hit the sound check around 3 o'clock, but I'm usually up around 9 in the morning. And I can take my computer and my microphone and my stuff on the road, and I can still create. So I haven't, again, gotten that far ahead of myself of, oh, what am I going to do with my projects? I know it'll work out. I don't know exactly how it's going to work out yet, but that's the beauty of technology, is I can do this anywhere. I could host my podcast anywhere that has a decent Wi-Fi signal. So I'm going to be okay. I haven't exactly figured out how it's all going to work out, but it's going to.
That's fantastic. I look forward to seeing how the show changes and kind of evolves over time as well. Because I think change can be a good thing to kind of inspire people to.
We got a lot of things in the works of what we want to do. Taking this in a couple different directions that are really, really different and interesting. I can't really go into too many of them yet because we're still building the ideas, but it's really cool.
Yeah, that's great. Tell me about the book. I really love the idea of how you have this, a book come or just came out
Yeah.
recently, but you're also working on a solo album to accompany the book, which I think is just fascinating to see that sort of crossover. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So again, I've released a couple. I released a single for charity for some years ago for a hospice network in Florida when my grandma had passed away, and raised over $10,000 for their hospice foundation called Tidewell Hospice. And that was very fulfilling. And I've released a couple other solo stuff here and there, but I've never done an album. I never had any ambition to do one. Again, I was always fulfilled creatively through the band. I never had like these delusions of I'm going to be a solo artist and go out and put a band together. No way, not interested. I'm not getting back in the van and playing to three people in Chilliwack on a Tuesday night. Not happening. I had to do the Pacific Northwest reference for you.
Yeah, I'd go to Chilliwack for a solo show.
I've been to Chilliwack. We had an off night there years ago, which there was a band called Chilliwack. I don't know if you remember back in.
Oh yeah.
And Less Than Jake used to cover the song "My Girl" by them.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent.
Which was a big Canadian hit that no one besides you and I probably knows.
Yeah.
Anyway. So what the hell was I saying? I lost track.
Solo album.
Yes.
And yeah.
So solo album. I had the book. It was released December 8th of 2020. So probably last summer, I was on the phone with the guys at Smart Punk. Smart Punk Records put the book out. They were the first people that I had called. They are a label from Florida. They do re-releases of different stuff. They've done a bunch of Less Than Jake vinyl re-releases. They're super fans of Less Than Jake. And I said, I'm putting this book together. Would you be interested? And they're like, well, we've never done a book. And I'm like, well, that's actually perfect because I've never done a book either. I don't want to go to some publishing house and be like, yeah, this is Chris DeMakes again. Less than who? Less than John? No, Less Than Jake. And I wanted to have it be like a, kind of a pet project with these guys. And we started getting into it. And there was so much, the book is based on these pictures. And I'll back up and give you the short story. December 5th, 2018, I woke up that morning, and I had been putting my studio together here. I had just moved. I was going through all my memorabilia. I've saved one of everything Less Than Jake ever put out. It's all behind me. I have it categorized in scrapbooks from day one. It's like ridiculous. Every snippet of newspaper article, I've saved everything. So I was going through some pictures and organizing them, and I took a picture and I posted on Instagram with a little story. And I said, jokingly, I'm going to post one of these a day for 365 days until I surpass Roger, our bass player, in Instagram followers. And JR, our sax player, is one of the first people to comment. He's like, you won't make it 2 weeks, but this is good content. I'm like, I'm going to show that SOB. So I started posting another picture with a story. And about 3 weeks into this, I realized I'm writing my book, one story, one picture at a time. And after 365 days, I'm going to bind this and release it in the order I put it out on Instagram. So that's what I did, and about last year, And I had wanted to do a book before. That's most of what I read. I read rock biographies and autobiographies. I always wanted to write one. And I got like maybe a couple chapters in one time even, and just kind of read like a lot of them. Like, hey, I'm Chris, I'm from Michigan, I was born then. And I didn't want to do it that way. So this was a really unorthodox way of doing a book. Smart Punk last summer said, hey, because I used to dress up in crazy characters on costumes on stage. I'd be a redneck one night. I'd be a baseball player. And when I say a baseball player, it wasn't like I had the baseball cap on and an Indians jersey. It was the black mascara under the eyes. It was the glove in the back pocket, the stirrups. I wore cleats on stage. I would rub dirt on the pants. Like I looked like I just got done playing baseball. So all the costumes were authentic, and if you read the book, you'll get into all the stories of the characters. So we were going through and we were laughing. We made a calendar, we made an air freshener, made all these different items, and the guy said, hey, what if you did music to accompany this? And I was like, that'd be great. I'll make it a reverse concept album. I'll write about the characters and the experiences of the book. So the first 7-inch came out last December with the book. That was the first 7-inch, 2 songs. The next one's coming out in April, the next one in July this year, then October, and February of 2022, the last 5-song 7-inch with 2 songs will come out. That'll be 10 songs. I have 2 songs held over that I'm going to tack on to my first full-length solo album called Blast from the Past, which is the name of the book. And that'll come out in May or June of 2022. So all along, the idea was to do an 18-month book campaign. Every couple months, have something new to push, reinvigorate the book, and get more sales. So that was the idea.
Yeah, that's excellent. I've always felt that the thing that has kept me a Less Than Jake fan and drew me to the band originally, with Hello Rockview, is the way that you guys kind of create narratives, create this sense of sort of like story and myth. And at the time, like I'd listen to Hello Rockview and it felt contemporary. It felt like, it hit me at that time. But now I listen back to it and I almost feel like there's sort of this Less Than Jake extended universe, like there's all these characters, all these places, like physical, real places that have a history for you guys, the band. But also like, Gainesville is about as far away from where I live as you can get and still be on the continent. But somehow like the stories that you've told and Vinny and everybody who's written songs for Less Than Jake kind of bring these ideas of just kind of, I think, life through the 90s and the early 2000s up to now. And so being able to tie that all together into a book is just fascinating to me. Like I just love the idea of creating a narrative and an ongoing story, and contextualizing all of that and bringing forward, what it all meant and giving it sort of shape. And that's really, that's excellent.
Yeah.
And then like, as a band and as a musician, bringing that together with, like, you call it a reverse concept album, I think kind of is full circle, which appeals to me a lot.
Yeah, usually you're writing songs that are a concept album. Here, the concept's already written.
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing songs about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of a reverse thing, and that's why I call it a reverse concept album. It's a cool idea. And again, the songs and the music, I'm not looking to sell a bunch of. I'm not going to. It's not the point. It's keeping busy. It's keeping my name out there, and it's fulfilling just something inside me now. That's just these little projects that lead to the next one, and you just meet certain people along the way. You never know who you're gonna meet through the journey, and that's kind of where that whole back half of my life thing I was talking about earlier. The last year and a half, my whole perspective on life has changed. And it was literally, I say overnight, but it was pretty quick. It was a matter of 2-3 months where all this started just kind of being like, what is my purpose every day when I get up? And I was starting to think crazy things like, do I want to do something outside of music? My neighbor's always trying to get me to help him down at his plant. My neighbor he's a manager at a large pharmaceutical company. You got to put on these suits and count pills coming down the line. He's like, I'll start you out at 17 an hour. I'll get you up to 20 after the first year. When you can work when you're here, when you go back on the road, it's fine. And like, he's throwing decent money at me. And I was like, he's always needs help. And I'm like, and then one night I'm like, here I am, I'm sitting there and I just had this just came over me. I'm like, what are you thinking? You're not going to work at a farm. You're a musician. Why did you start all of this? And I always tell people, I'll get bands that do these consultations with me, and I'll be brief about this, but they'll say, where do you get your t-shirts made? And where do you get the, and I'm like, hey, let's back up here for a second. I haven't heard one song from you guys yet. I don't want to talk about your t-shirts or the band name. And what I get at with that is that, you know, which brings me back to what I was just talking about. What is it that I do? Not the stage, not the podcast, not the book, not the live performance, not the guitar endorsement, not talking to somebody else for an interview podcast. What started all this? The song had to come first. The song always comes first. After you get the song, then you can make another song. When you get enough songs, you can go play your friend's party, or you can go play the local bar. Then someone goes, well, hey, do you have any of these recorded? I like these. No. Well, I have a record label. You want to put these songs out on my label? Yeah. Well, you got to go record it. Oh, my friend has a studio. Well, before you can go record at the studio or put the record out, what do you need? Songs. Okay. Well, now you got the songs, and now you can attach what? A band name to the songs. Now you can make a t-shirt that references. You're not going to have a t-shirt. I got a band. What's your band called? Oh, we're called the XYZs. Oh, that's great. You got any music? No. Well, no one's going to buy your shirt, most likely. Then you're just a t-shirt company. So it all goes back to the song. And that's really what hit me. And I just had this thing come over me like, how do I make my life revolve around the songs with Less Than Jake, which I know how to do that, but outside of it. And that's what I've transcended. That's what the book, that's the podcast, songwriting, that's the, you know, video consultations with people, helping them with their songwriting, on down the line of everything that we talked about.
I think for me, like when I think back, I'm about 10 years younger than you, but when I think back to like when I kind of first started taking writing seriously, I was fueled a lot by, you know, enthusiasm and energy and dreams, and that kind of like that pushed me forward. But there wasn't a lot of like logic and structure to the way I tackled projects or the way I thought about kind of developing a career. And that changed probably after I had kids. Like I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and after they were born, I started kind of thinking more structurally. And I think it was just a natural process for me in growing up, but thinking about like you say, like, how do you lay down those first building blocks? Like what needs to come first, and then what needs to come after that? And how do you kind of build those all together into layers? And you might develop them all at different speeds. But I think being able to look at my kind of creative output and art as a business, as work, and also as something that kind of fulfills me was an important step for me, being able to kind of leapfrog from something that's just driven purely by like energy to something that's kind of more not spontaneous but more intentional, I suppose. What And I think that kind of brings me to my last question here, which is like, what would you recommend, or what would you say to people who, you know, over the past year, or just, you know, generally wherever they are in sort of their creative career, like people who are having trouble starting that project that means something to them? This, you know, they see themselves down the line successfully kind of pulling off or living that life or that project. Like, what do you say to people who are having trouble getting it going?
Yeah, well, I think I kind of have said it during this discussion.
Mm,
I'll go back to just kind of taking a step back from yourself and taking stock and inventory of what does this project really mean to me, and what's the you know, what's the defining characteristic or the defining, you know, thing of this project, and narrowing that down, and then getting up and like I said, it could be just journaling. It could be
mm,
writing about it and writing about your ideas. I also think that isolating is the worst thing you could do. I think that you have to reach out to like-minded people.
mhm,
You know, if you're a writer and they're your friend, they pick up the phone and call you and go, listen, I'm starting my damn book. Okay. But I'm a little scattered right now. And I just, you know, what's the best way to go about this? And you might say to them, well, I'd start with an outline. Just do the first 10 chapters, do an out, you know, do a Roman numeral 1 for chapter 1 down to the X for 10, and just start doing a rough outline. And then getting up and just focusing on chapter 1, building within all the notes and just writing that one. And chapter 1 might take you a month, but don't put a time frame on it. Just do that. It's just taking everything and pulling it back, and really hyper focusing on that day, and not getting too far ahead of yourself. And, you know, it's nice to have a deadline. Yeah, I'd like this book to be ready by September, but, you know, it might not be ready by September, you know, and some of that stuff's out of our control.
yeah, finding those achievable steps and focusing on that without becoming overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I think that's it for me. I've got a ton from this chat to write up what I want for the newsletter, and
Cool.
I appreciate being able to talk to you about this. And
Right on.
yeah, so I just want to give you an opportunity here to talk about you know, we've talked about your book and your podcast and stuff, but just, you know, like, where can people find you online? What do you put out recently? What do you want to put a bit of a spotlight on?
Yeah, I think I pretty much said everything. You know, you can, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find my podcast, Chris DeMakes a Podcast. If you'd like the solo albums and the book, you can go to chrisdemakes.com. Clever, I know. That's DEMAKES. You can find me on Instagram at less than Chris D. Give me a follow. On Twitter, I'm less than Chris. And yeah, you know, that's pretty much it. You know, Less Than Jake is, I got a new record called Silver Linings that just came out, and we're always doing stuff. We got another live stream we're working on getting planned here pretty soon to do that. So just, you know, like I said, just staying as busy as I can, and just, you know, taking each day as they come.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, and best of health in 2021, and I hope that kind of this momentum with your personal projects, the Less Than Jake and everything else, keeps up and just keeps growing for you, because I've been impressed just by your dedication and everything that you put into everything you've been doing over the past year. So I
Right on.
appreciate you talking to me.
Thank you. Yeah, and best of luck to you too.
All right, thanks so much.